In today's video, let's examine how your childhood is causing you to live in fear as an adult. Oftentimes in private practice, therapists hear somebody coming in to work on a current issue in their adult life, and they just can't make sense of the fact that it's stemming from childhood. They'll hear things like, oh, that was years ago, that was decades ago. What does that have to do with me now? Why would I even want to explore this? They're not able to connect the dots that, yes, it formulated way back when, and if you don't deal with it and understand how it's impacting you, it just kind of creeps along into your adult life. And let's look at what this state of fear is all about, right? Because if you're living in a state of fear, how do you know you're even in a state of anything? It's so normalized for you. You're so used to it. It's like using an analogy of asking a fish what it's like to live in water. Because they've always lived in and been surrounded by water, they don't know they're in the water. Same thing for people who live in fear. They may not even know what you're talking about because how they're living, this hypervigilance, this sense of dread, this always being in performance mode, this constant racing heart is always there. It's how they relate to life. People who don't grow up in trauma may not horribilize things the way somebody who grows up in trauma does as an adult. It doesn't have the same meaning. For example, a coworker at work telling you that you didn't do a very good job on this presentation. Somebody who didn't grow up in childhood trauma may be thankful for the input. Some valuable criticism perhaps, some things to grow on. But adults who've grown up with childhood trauma may be paranoid about that. They're out to get me. Why does that person hate me? And so off it spirals into many conclusions about this one little incident. And we can see the differences in response, right? Something helpful to take in versus you're out to get me. Someone living in fear is always scanning their environment, always looking for what's coming up. There's always some sort of trouble looming, something waiting ahead for them that's going to get them. That's a tough way to live. So it's important to connect that to our childhood, understand what happened. So some things to discover that you may be living in fear and it's become normalized for you. Is it difficult on an ongoing basis to share your authentic self? Do you try to not have a voice? It just doesn't feel safe to speak freely, to have your opinion. Another way it can show is you are afraid to take chances. You just want things very stable, almost like living in a box in a way. And this can tie into minor things like, well, I don't want to go to the movie theater tonight because maybe there's going to be a terrorist attack there. I don't want to go out in public. There could be a lot of social anxiety. Interacting with people can be overwhelming. And that's understandable, right? If you were raised in a chaotic household where nothing was ever safe and perhaps you're a victim of some kind of abuse, then obviously just interacting with somebody in a social way may feel like climbing a mountain. It's just too much because social interaction usually requires that we're able to just be ourselves at any given time. Well, if you're raised with no boundaries, then that's going to be very difficult to do as an adult. So then that can bring a sense of isolation. So do you feel isolated and it's become normal for you? Maybe some sort of panic disorder or a phobia going on. What's that about? Have you asked yourself? We could sprinkle in a bit of paranoia. The world's out to get you. We all have days like that perhaps, but if it's an ongoing, consistent pattern for you over many years and you feel like it's holding you back in life, keeping you from making authentic, loving connections with others, keeping some good friends, maybe having a romantic relationship in your life if you want to. If it's doing that, then that's telling you, that's as someone patting you on the back saying, you may want to address this in therapy. So what's the level? How is it impacting your life, this living in fear? I did want to mention for the last example, I think people don't take this into account enough, where it's even gotten to the level where little kids perhaps want to change their gender because they're not comfortable in their own body in terms of what it means to be a boy or a girl. These things are very confusing and there's a lot of gray area. It seems to be an overreaction even, sometimes even in school systems where teachers are suggesting that one way to work with anxiety, living in fear, is to question who you are in terms of being a boy or a girl. This is really putting the cart before the horse. We have to be careful with this issue because one's gender and perhaps changing one's gender has nothing to do with just understanding what's going on in here, how we're living in fear. And that's why it's important to unthread all this so it doesn't get more convoluted as we go into adolescence and into adulthood. These are some of the things that people think because it's way in the past, it can't affect me now. For example, witnessing domestic violence between your parents, having a parent that struggles with some sort of addiction, some sort of substance abuse. Of course, a child being beaten up, physical abuse, having a parent climb in bed with them at night, sexual abuse, being told repeatedly that they're stupid and they're not going to amount to anything, verbal abuse, being smothered and treated like a mini husband, mini wife. They're supposed to be there and help their parent listen to all their adult problems, emotional abuse, and of course being bullied, being scapegoated, some form of abandonment, total lack of any dealing with feelings in your family whatsoever. Maybe you can't even name a feeling. Are you able to chill out? How does that happen? How do you relax? Do you need something to make you or help you relax? That's a big red flag. For example, if you have to go out and have some drinks at the pub, can't relax without that, what's that about? Perhaps it's because you're living in a state of fear and you need something to help you wind down. You can't do it on your own. And children who grow up in childhood trauma, it's documented that they can have neurological changes to their brain. Changes to their nervous system can go on for a lifetime if they don't catch it. So living in a state of fear is a very challenging way to live life, and you don't have to live your whole life this way. If you're able to go in and process some of this with a therapist, help somebody assist you in exploring the underlying reasons, it's amazing how we can have a new view of life as we begin to remove some of the internalization and realize we're simply dealing with perhaps very toxic parents. But usually we need some help to be able to make this type of deep underlying connection. But when we do, it can be very freeing for us, and we're reclaiming ourselves in a way, right? And therefore, after that, we can begin to experience more joy in our life because we're connecting all of these very complicated dots. So please leave me some comments below. Let me know if this has affected you in your life. Are you living in a state of fear? Please subscribe to my mental health YouTube channel if you like these kind of videos. And until next week, this is Brad Shore signing off from Ask a Shrink.